This time of the year, Zan, many of us experience the holiday winter blues. What does that mean? What are the holiday winter blues? Are they the same as seasonal depression? And if so, what's the difference?
Well, there are people who get sad around holiday time, and that could be for reasons like missing someone who's gone or feeling, it often has to do with a feeling of should. I should have more people to connect to and I don't, or I should have a busy social calendar and I don't, or I should feel happier around the holidays. The word should comes up a lot around holiday feelings of sadness or withdrawal. And I would say then there's the winter blues, which many human beings get. I mean, there is something about the shorter days of the winter, the lack of sunlight, sometimes people feel impeded from going outside because of the weather, and here in New England, the cold. And that is something I would say is subclinical. In other words, it's not a full diagnosis, but it's something that people have to have a self-care plan or a cope-ahead plan to deal with those feelings of winter blues. And then beyond that, if there's a more severe version of it, it would be a depression with a seasonal pattern. So what we typically or commonly is called seasonal affective disorder or seasonal depression is usually in the diagnostic books called depression with a seasonal pattern. And some people actually get it in the summer. They get more depressed in the summer and it clears up in the fall and winter. But most seasonal pattern depression happens in the winter for most human beings, again, because of the way we're wired. And that is diagnosed if someone's had that for at least two seasons in a row, and then it gets better when the season changes. So once you've had it 2 years in a row, and then you notice it gets better in the springtime, let's say, that could be leading toward a diagnosis of the seasonal depression with a seasonal pattern.
Okay. So what are some of the symptoms of holiday winter blues? Are they the same as feelings of loneliness, or is it something different?
So the symptoms of holiday or seasonal blues, we could call that kind of a catch-all phrase that people often refer to around this time, where they feel something about their life feels unsatisfactory. I don't have enough plans, or I don't have enough friends, or I don't feel happy enough the way, I'm not matching the mood of the Hallmark Channel and the, lights in the windows and that kind of thing. And so those symptoms might be, I'm just feeling more withdrawn. I'm feeling it's harder to get out of bed in the morning, or it's harder even to feel some energy during the day, even if I've gotten plenty of sleep. It's hard to say yes to things, even if I sort of want to go. If you do get an invitation, sometimes people get into such a pattern of withdrawal that it's hard to even say yes to, an invitation they might get. And then if we go to the more extreme version of that, or the sort of more deep version of that as seasonal depression, we would say that comes along with a package of symptoms, often intense food cravings. Actually, this is a big one, intense carbohydrate cravings, which is different from typical depression, where people may lose their appetite a bit in typical depression. But in seasonal depression, often there's a strong carbohydrate craving in the wintertime. Could be related to some changes in our neurotransmitters, some brain chemicals, and intense need to sleep, and yet feeling groggy and not well rested during the day. So again, with a typical depression that's not related to season, sometimes we see a lot of insomnia, but in winter depression, in this seasonal pattern, see people who are sleeping a lot and still not feeling rested during the day. Those are two of the hallmarks that people could really look for to think.
Christine, what should I do if I'm worried that I or someone I care about may be showing signs of early dementia?
It's a great question, and it's a very important one. The first thing I would do is I would start really paying attention to the sort of things that person may be doing and their level of consistency about it. So sometimes when people are really stressed, or they have a lot on their mind, or they haven't slept well, they may demonstrate more trouble with forgetfulness or keeping track of things. If that's just sort of a blip in the screen, it's worth sort of paying attention to that. If, on the other hand, you're starting to see some consistency with some of these changes, and you're starting to notice perhaps some new changes, that's when it's really worth actually seeking medical attention, going to your primary care provider, saying, I'm worried about my memory, or I'm worried about my loved one's memory, and here's what I'm observing. And the more information that you have that you can communicate about some of these very specific things that are going on, the more information that will offer to your doctor, and then they will be able to do some further assessment and screening to see whether or not there might be cause for additional concern.
My own 95-year-old mother is living with dementia. And as her child, should I be concerned that it may be passed on to me or a sibling? Are there any strong genetic links to the disease?
So Alzheimer's, there is a certain kind of dementia, not Alzheimer's dementia, but there is a certain kind of dementia that is familial, where there is a very clear passing on of the dementia from generation to generation. That is not actually true for Alzheimer's disease. So for your mother, it's just as likely that you wouldn't get it perhaps as you would, but it is true that having a family history of dementia is one of many risks, just like having a family history of heart disease is a risk for getting heart disease, but it's not for sure that you will get heart disease or for sure that you're going to get dementia. It's sort of one of those things that are worth paying attention to, and then looking at the ways that you can reduce risk by some of the lifestyle changes that you can make can help.
Okay. Jen, I want to bring this back to the loneliness and social isolation, because one of your missions is to provide, to keep people out of institutional care by providing them services where they can age at home. But at the same time, we know that people want to live in their homes, but oftentimes that can be an opposing kind of directive, because people tend to be, if they're not connected to their communities and to their loved ones, we begin to see them live in loneliness. So how do you propose we address what could be these opposite kinds of perspectives?
Absolutely. You bring up a really good point, that challenge between some of the benefits of living in an assisted living setting or living in a setting with other older adults is that you do have that connectedness to peers. And so when you are at home, we have to work a little bit harder to make sure that folks stay connected. I think the most important thing that we do as an agency in order to address social isolation of older adults is really to sit down with the individual and understand what's important to them. You might hear some people talk about, we're not going to talk about what's the matter with you, we're going to talk about what matters to you. So talking with any individual and understand what is important to them. For some people, it's making sure they stay connected to their grandparents or their grandchildren who might live in the other part of the country. So social connectedness in that way might be working with them to teach them how to use a tablet or how to get on Facebook or how to use FaceTime on a smartphone so that they can stay connected in that way. And other ways people are going to tell them what's important to them is making sure that they stay nourished and they have enough food to eat. So then we might talk to them about our congregate meals in the community, meals where they can go at a senior center or a housing facility and have breakfast or lunch with other peers. In other cases, they want to do all of those things, but they aren't able to drive for one reason or another. So how do we provide transportation, work with our partners to make sure they can get to congregate sites? So it's important to understand that what social connectedness looks like is going to be different for each one of us. And if we root that in, what really matters to you, what's important to you, we can oftentimes find the right ways to enhance connection and at the same time honor what's important to the individual.
Good. Jen, for someone watching today who's not aware of the AAA services and programs in their areas and want to learn more about these programs in their communities, how do they find them?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways that we can do that. I mean, the easiest way really is if you remember the number 1-800-AGE-INFO. That's 1-800 AGEINFO, and you call that number, they can tell you who the Area Agency on Aging or the ASAP is in your community. So you don't have to worry about finding us. You can just call that one number. If you're somebody who prefers to use the intranet, you can go to masshomecare.org. That's MASSHONECARE.org, and you'll be able to see then all of the area agencies on aging that are across the state. They cover 100% of the cities and towns in Massachusetts, and you'll be able to see who serves your town.
So many of the practices that you've just described can be classified as being solo kinds of things, things that one does alone. But if you are searching, or if you are socially isolated and really looking for connections, what is that bridge from developing your own individual spiritual journey and actually connecting with others? How does that work?
Boy, that's a great question. And so I think the answer, well, there's a couple of answers. One is, if the place for you to start is with something individual, go ahead and start that. And then, as you begin to experience it, notice if there are other folks that you're reading about, hearing about, who are sharing that experience, or do a little research and find the group that likes to walk in the woods together on Saturdays. So you can start by developing something yourself and then say, how do I connect with other people who have a similar experience? That's one way in. Another way in is to say, I want to look for something like an open spirit, something like a faith community, something like a yoga studio that has very kind of gentle, that when you read their website, you get a sense that you can be who you are. And try it. Yeah. You know, I believe that loneliness is part of the human condition, because we are all connected and we are all different. So no matter how much time I spend with you, I don't fully know you. You don't fully know me. And that can lead to this sense of I am alone. Nobody knows me. And so we're all sharing that. And if we can get past the judgments that we make about the fact that I feel lonely, to say everybody struggles with loneliness. And no matter how much you and I talk, I'm never going to fully know you, but maybe that's actually good, because then I can ask you something. Right. Then there's a discovery, then there's an awakening, then there's curiosity, and yeah. So then there's mystery, and mystery is really good.
Yes, it is. How important, Cassidy, is community in maintaining social health, and what can communities do to support well-being, social well-being for its members?
I love this question because a lot of times when we think about connection, we think about our one-on-one individual relationships, right? A coworker or a friend or a family member, and what those mean to us. And those are really important sources of social health. But it's also really important that we feel a sense of belonging and feel a sense of community with groups that we belong to. Even if you don't know everyone in that community, feeling like you're part of something bigger can be an important source of social health. So when we think about a community as a neighborhood, or a community as a workplace, or other kinds of communities that we might belong to, a church, for example, these are really vital sources of helping people feel seen, heard, and like they matter and are important. And I would love to see more initiatives here in Massachusetts and across the US and around the world to really double down on the importance of strengthening local communities. Right now, I think a lot of people feel disconnected, and that's what the data shows us, right in their own homes, in the places where they live. And that's a huge missed opportunity and something that needs to change if we're going to really reweave the social fabric in our culture.
It's certainly something that we as a coalition is looking into. So that's very important to us. So continue to let us know what the research is showing, and especially when you see innovative, creative ways in which the community can be involved. I think we'd like to share that.
And I think the coalition is a great example of leading the charge on that and helping encourage people to connect, to take on leadership roles in their communities, to bring people together. And the more that we can spread that message and inspire people, even in small ways, right? So for example, there are studies showing that smiling and waving to your neighbors can help people improve their mood and even feel less lonely, right? It can be as simple gestures as that, or helping someone out, doing simple acts of kindness, right? It doesn't have to be as big as throwing a block party. It can be as simple as introducing yourself to someone who just moved in.
And can you share to us the health benefits of shared meals, and how does it really impact well-being?
Yes. So by now there are 25 or 30 years of dozens and dozens of scientific studies that show when families or adults or firefighters, friends eat together, it benefits their mental health and their physical health. Just to give a few examples, when you share meals, you're more likely to eat less sugar and fat and salt, to have lower rates of obesity. For teens, there's better cardiovascular health when kids eat with their families. And adults tend to eat more nutritiously if they eat with others, whether it's a friend or their children or their grandchildren. And then in terms of mental health, families who eat together have kids who have lower risk of high-risk behaviors, so lower rates of depression and anxiety and substance abuse and eating disorders, and higher rates of resilience and self-esteem. And this is true for adults too. There's been more recent research that shows that eating with others doesn't just benefit teens and children, it also benefits adults, that their mood is improved when they eat with other people, and their nutrition is also improved.
Yours is called the Family Dinner Project. Define family for us.
So I think of family in a very broad way. I think family is anybody who makes you feel at home. Family is anybody who roots you in your community. Family could be college kids eating together in a cafeteria. It could be older people breaking bread in assisted living. It could be one person having dinner with a friend. And it doesn't have to be dinner. It could be breakfast, it could be a snack. So it's any two people coming together and sharing food with one another, using it as a time to relax, maybe have a laugh, check in with each other about how they're doing, tell a story.
We all hear about memory cafes and how wonderful they are. What are memory cafes? Are they only in Massachusetts? And what happens at a memory cafe?
Great questions. Memory cafes are welcoming social gatherings for people living with cognitive changes, does not have to be diagnosed, and those who care about them. So that can include family members, friends, and also professional caregivers if they have one. And they did not start here. They actually, the very first cafe was launched in Leiden, Holland, by a geriatric psychiatrist who had the idea that people would be more likely to feel comfortable talking about dementia in a warm, relaxed, informal environment, almost more like a party. And so he started the first cafe, and it's such a great idea that it spread throughout Europe and eventually came to the United States in about 2008 and has spread all over. I'm very proud to say Massachusetts is one of the states with the most cafes. We are right up there with Wisconsin. At this point, we have around 100 cafes throughout Massachusetts.
Oh, now are these special places, or are they actually hosted at a cafe? and the time is reserved for those with cognitive impairment, or are they just in special settings?
They're in all kinds of places, and they're all independently run. So it really has been at the initiative of organizations and individuals throughout Massachusetts to, find a space that works. Many of them are held at senior centers, many at libraries. There are some at cafes and restaurants, art centers, nature centers, community centers, all different kinds of places. Nationwide, libraries have just surpassed senior centers as the most common setting, which I think is really exciting because a library is really a community space for people of any age. So I think it's, again, particularly good to break down some of those age silos and help us all see that this is something that affects all of us, and we all need to come together as a community to support people affected by cognitive changes and dementia.
So who actually attends the Memory Cafe? Is it open to the public or is by invitation only?
They are, because they're run by different organizations, there's different requirements. Some do require an RSVP, especially those that maybe have a smaller space, or maybe they offer lunch and just logistically they need that RSVP. But they are open to the public. They're free of charge. And Dementia Friends is also free of charge, I should have mentioned. And they are really places for people to come together and have fun, because joy is often one of the necessary ingredients for living well that sort of goes out the window when people are living with a chronic condition. And we really want to bring that back. People need joy. They need joy to make life worth living. And for people who attend along with someone they care about, it's kind of a battery recharge for that relationship, to be able to do something fun that's not, going to the doctor or kind of taking care of the day-to-day challenges of life, but is just spending time together and getting to enjoy one another.
I would imagine it's quite beneficial for the caregiver as well.
Absolutely. And that's one feature of memory cafes, is they're really designed both for people living with cognitive changes or dementia and for those who care about them. They are both our sort of target audience.
When the Commonwealth became a age-friendly state, there was a special age-friendly commission, I think, that was established. What is the role of that commission?
Yeah, the commission was really geared to get a better understanding of how Massachusetts residents are aging in community, to in fact help, lead to the creation of the state's action plan, and better understanding of where can the state in turn find opportunities for that cross collaboration of sectors in the state government, as well as opportunities to fund projects in community that really identify the needs of our older adults, so that Massachusetts can be a great state for people to live and age in.
Okay, so how does that commission, if you would, stay in touch with the residents? Do you meet with them? Do you have annual meetings, workshops, conferences? How does that work?
Yeah, so when the commission was active, they were in fact doing a listening series where they would get around the communities, several parts of the state, to gather feedback from residents and municipal leadership, to get a better understanding of where communities stood, especially with that specific population of older adults. Are people staying in the state? Are they leaving, and why are they leaving? So really getting a better understanding of where people are, what's happening in community, and that's more or less where we land. From that information, we do have periodic meetings. There's a handful of organizations that are around the table using this feedback and trying to figure out, well, where can our organizations serve and support the initiative across the state.
Amy, what are some of the unique obstacles or barriers people living with visual loss face that may be different from those who are just generally lonely?
I think one of the most obvious barriers
lack of transportation. Most people use vision for everything until they can't. And particularly if you don't live within the city, it may be very difficult to get from place to place, even places that you've frequented all your life. And the lack of transportation is a real barrier. Another barrier that exists is that for many people who are living with visual disabilities and decreasing vision, it can be quite overwhelming to try to traverse spaces that, particularly unfamiliar environments, when you no longer can rely on your vision to assist you. So for example, lighting can make a huge difference. It can be difficult for many to recognize faces. And for many people, they haven't learned the compensatory skills that are available and that are necessary to be able to move comfortably and competently in their communities. And so those are tremendous barriers that people need to learn to surmount. Sometimes social situations, particularly crowded rooms and areas where there are a lot of noise, can be particularly difficult for people with visual impairments to manage because, again, they don't have the visual stimuli that they are so accustomed to using to manage those environments and situations, and need to learn to use other senses and other skills to manage those situations. But I think the other thing that underlies so much of this and provides perhaps the greatest challenge is that when you think about it, in most instances, I would say 99% of the population, if you use the word blind and someone just free associates, the words that come to people's minds are not independent, self-sufficient, capable. The stereotypic images of blindness and visual impairment are very insidious and they are very pervasive. And most people who acquire visual disabilities learn and believe that life may be over for them. And in many ways, the society often minimizes the capacities of people with visual impairments. And this may make it much more difficult for people to go out of their homes, to embrace opportunities, to learn new skills, and to feel worthy. Okay. For many people also, it's very difficult because they may feel that they're going to have to be totally dependent upon others, which is uncomfortable for many who have been the master of their own lives for so many years.
As always, we invite you to join us again next month for another episode of Connect. Until then, we urge you to reach out to your neighbors and those you love, especially those living alone. Visit us at inlonelinessma.com to watch past episodes of Connect, to learn more about the Coalition and ways you can help to address the loneliness epidemic in the Commonwealth. Thank you.